delivery is a nightmare. If you got smart men and women around the table together to create packaging to move wine from winery to dining table, they would not create a round glass bottle. For online, or what's called distance selling, a packaging that shatters easily, is heavy, spatial efficient, costs a lot to move, incurs a lot of carbon now. Yeah, it's just a nightmare packaging. Packaging that contains products that we consume is more important than packaging that contains products that we might sit on, or whatever, a sofa or a chair or a table. So I believe people care about that. I believe that faced with two choices, an unbranded pack or a branded pack at the same price with the same accessibility, people would choose the branded one. So wine is a natural online product. And why I say that is wine has a massive long tail. It's a very large number of very small volume products. So wine has a lot of those products, and so naturally lends itself to online. But it's been a miserable failure online so far. So I think packaging is mostly to blame for that. Who in their mind would put 750 milliliters of wine, which weighs 750 grams, in a bottle that also weighs 750 grams?
This is Dolia Talks with me, Giovanni Binello. Now, Dolia Talks is the show where we discuss with the best sales and marketing professionals in the world of wine, spirits, and beverages in general. Our guest today is Santiago Navarro. Santiago is the founder of Packamama, a UK startup which is revolutionizing wine packaging through recycled PET flat bottles. Before Packamama, Santiago launched Vinopic Wines, one of the first online wine retailers in the UK. So Santiago has a ton of knowledge of wine sales, e-commerce, branding, and especially on sustainability and how packaging will change the industry. This was a truly great show. We started from distribution, we discussed about sales, about branding, about packaging and sustainability. So there really were a ton of insights. As usual, if you have any feedback, if you want to share suggestions on future guests, feel free to write an email at giovanni@getdolia.com. Enjoy the show. Hello, Santiago. Welcome to Dolia Talks.
Hi, Giovanni. Thanks for having me, and good to talk to you on a sunny autumn London day. We need the blue skies and the sun with these early dark mornings. But yeah, great to be talking to you, and thanks for your interest in Packamama and innovation and sustainability in wine.
Of course, of course. So I want to start really from a phrase that you told me the first time we met. You describe yourself as a wine guy in packaging, not a packaging guy in wine. So tell me why this is important and why do you introduce yourself like that?
Because I guess wine is a complex beverage compared to the other beverages. So you can be a packaging guy in mineral water or carbonated soft drinks and, you know, do a really good job. I just think that if you don't understand the complexity of wine, if you don't understand winemakers and the fact that every vintage is like a new child and they love it like a child and care for it like a child, you don't understand these specifics. So the need for being very good at preserving wine, being packaging that's inert, non-reactive, good gas barrier, have the data to protect, handle, and communicate packaging in a wine language to wine people, then I think it would be even harder than it is. It's already hard as a wine guy in packaging. I think as a packaging guy in wine, it probably would be now an impossible. I have looked to others who I've engaged with from packaging giants who are trying to make it in wine and have struggled. And I've sometimes been asked why have you managed where you've not had the resources we have. You're an entrepreneur, a startup entrepreneur. And sometimes I put it down when I have the conversations with them. I just think, God, you don't understand the wine industry. How are you ever going to make it work in this complex product? So yeah, I guess that's the genesis to that saying. And I'm happy that I'm a wine guy in packaging. Also makes me more fun. Packaging people in wine would be pretty boring.
And I would like to go back to your origin story. So when you were just a wine guy and not yet in packaging.
Yeah.
So I know one of your first ventures was an online wine retailer, right?
Yeah.
And I'm curious to if you could walk us through this first experience, so your origin story, and What did you learn from this that then led you to work in supply chain and packaging?
Yeah, great question. I moved to London in 2005 from Amsterdam. My biggest wine selection in Amsterdam was actually the large supermarket on the Dam Square, Albert Heijn. It was a pretty small wine selection, so you could much easier make an informed wine choice. But when I came to the UK and I started shopping in big supermarkets, big UK supermarkets, I encountered the biggest wall of wine I had seen in my adult life. And I was like, oh my God, how does anyone make a choice with this huge selection? I mean, it's really the example of paradox of choice, where a bit of extra choice makes people feel empowered, and excited too much just freezes people into not knowing what to do. And I started thinking, is there not a better way to retail wine? People are using price as a benchmark of quality, but that's false. You don't necessarily pay more and get better value. You might be just paying demand and supply or branding. And so I decided to create a business called Vinopic Wines, and we had a quality score, which was a numeric number, which was agnostic of the price, and there was a sort of weighting to reward cheaper wines that were better quality. But generally speaking, was there as a online wine business to challenge other ways of buying wine and to empower people to make an informed decision every time, whether it was a special event wine or a regular wine. So that was the Vinopic Wines experience. But I think I share the same view as anyone who sells wine online. Delivery is a nightmare. If you got smart men and women around the table together to create packaging to move wine from winery to dining table, they would not create a round glass bottle. For online, or what's called distance selling, D2C, direct consumer, not to use jargon, um, a packaging that shatters easily, is heavy, spatial efficient, costs a lot to move, incurs a lot of carbon now, increasingly important, and for me the most important metric. Yeah, it's just a nightmare packaging. So so Vinopic Wines was an interesting learning, and probably was my accelerated learning of wine. I mean, you taste wine with a master of wine on regular occasions, and you're just wow. But it was wound down for me to looking at a bigger opportunity. I thought the world doesn't need another line wine company now. Probably the world of wine needs better wine packaging for the 21st century. Uh, Wine packaging for the Amazon generation. I mean, let me just be clear. When I started Vinopic Wines, I assumed that wine could only come in round glass bottles, and that's what it would always come in. So I was blinkered like everyone else. But as you're building a business, you look at where you're incurring costs, what's taking up time, breakages, having to send those partly broken boxes back to a warehouse, get them sorted, ask a warehouse person to try to work out which bottle broke from a mixed case of 12. They don't recognize the label because it's all stained with wine.
Let's stay for a second on distribution because you mentioned, of course, this was a D2C business, no? Do you see value in D2C nowadays for wineries? So let me rephrase this. If you were operating a winery, would you give, let's say, priority to D2C, or would you still go through traditional distribution channels?
So two things, first of all, and I'll answer the winery question in D2C afterwards. So Vinopic Wines was an online merchant, so it was a distance selling model, not a D2C. We didn't sell our own wines. The winery example is a good one, but we took wine in bulk. So from pallets, and then we broke those pallets down, and you could buy a full box or a mixed case, etc. So the traditional wine.com and other such models. If I had a winery, would I sell D2C? Wow, yeah, for sure. I mean, that's the dream. Build a big enough database of loyal customers and cut out all the middle people and make maximum margin and engage those people and give them a lovely experience and use good packaging for it. And we've got a good example out of Australia. The pioneering Mark Davidson owns one of the best known wineries in Hunter Valley called Tamburlaine Wines, and one of the leading organic producers in Australia. And they activated more than a year ago now a new brand called Drinking, and it's in our packaging, and it sells online, and it sells online really well. I mean, I think the first time we did 50,000 units, they sold in 5 weeks. I mean, that's, most people would wish they sold 50,000 units in 5 weeks in a big retailer, let alone direct, keeping all the margin yourself, and actually saves a lot of money on the delivery of the product. So, yeah, I think the US wineries also do a great job with this. The Hunter Valley, actually, outside Sydney, is a good example, by the way, because it has lots of visitors. So people visit the winery, go to Cellar Door, they can get signed up to a database. And the same thing in the US. Some wineries do a good job. They have good Cellar Door track to engage that audience, sign them up, and sell direct. So more margin, more engagement, I think also more rewarding as a winery executive owner, winemaker. You get direct feedback, who's enjoying your wine. Comes back to that point I mentioned before, many people in wine, they're like artists. I think the art world and the wine world have much in common. The people who frequent it, work in it, it's something more than a job. It's part of their identity. It's deeply ingrained in their life. So, yeah, definitely D2C. Better packaging, better technology, good database management, good follow-up.
So what did you realize during this experience at Vinopic that then led you to the idea of Packamama? So what was the origin story behind Packamama?
The critical realization is that primary packaging informs secondary and tertiary packaging. Now, primary is the packaging that sits directly in contact with the goods that it transports or carries. And so in the instance of wine, it's like a bottle or a can. So if you have poor primary packaging, you end up with a lot of secondary or tertiary packaging, protected packaging to get it to market. So we realized that however thick your box was and however many fragile stickers you put on the box, you would still have somebody who would manage to break the bottles in the box. I think the fragile sticker by some was taken as an invitation to play football or rugby. So, yeah, you realize that basically you gotta change the bottle for different business models.
I'm curious about the material, no? So you use recycled PET, right?
We use PET as a base resin because it's inert, it's transparent. I mean, it's pretty ideal for wine. We boost its gas barrier by means of additives that are recyclable. They have no impact on the wine. We also include a UV inhibitor that removes the risk of light strike. And sometimes we color the bottles for visual.
And because I saw also other startups making, for example, wine in paper bottles or aluminum bottles. So how is PET different from these other materials, and why did you choose PET over these materials?
Pretty easy choice, to be honest. Aluminium is not transparent and it's reactive with wine. So with that in mind, PET is far superior for wine than aluminium. Paper obviously can't be in contact with a liquid. It becomes a mushy pulp. So it has a plastic liner. So if you're going to have a plastic liner, you might as well just have a plastic bottle. Why deforest just to cover the plastic bottle? It makes no sense. So you also got in a fridge or in an ice bucket. Yeah, doesn't work. So PET is the natural choice.
If I could summarize in 3 words, maybe the overall value proposition of Packamama, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I see surely an element of sustainability, as you mentioned. Then there's the operational efficiency layer, so making shipping and packaging more efficient. And then there's also part of branding, because of course it's a different packaging, so it plays a big role in branding. Which one of these do you see is more appealing for your customers? So is it sustainability, is it the efficiency, or is it the branding and the differentiation side?
Depends which customer. First, it's important to say the wine world is very big. Morgan Stanley Research puts the figure down to 1 million commercial wineries globally. I think that's a bit overstated, but there are a lot of very small producers across the globe, and many of them are commercial, even if on a local level. Australia has 2,200 wineries. France, depends on whose figures, 15, 17,000 wineries. Different wineries have different needs. Different retailers have different requests. The retailer is not normally our customer, but they're our partner, because they enable the shelf space to get the wineries into sustainable packaging. I think sustainability should be everyone's. The wine industry is deeply impacted by global warming and the impact of extreme weather events as a result of a heating planet. So let me be clear, the wine industry has about 8,000 vintages or 8,000 years of history. In the last decade or two, it's had an excessive level of extreme weather events, frosts in the northern hemisphere, spring, things that the vines hate. The vines love consistency in temperature and reliability of seasonality. It's not getting it anymore, and it risks. There's one study from the US that shows that 2 degrees of heating, around 50% of the world of wine would be rewritten. We already see this in places like Burgundy or Champagne, where people call into question whether there remains to be another generation who will take the bounties of the land. So sustainability needs to be for everybody. I mean, not being sustainable as a wine company is just absolutely bad for business, bad for livelihood, bad for future generations. It's just nonsensical and idiotic. So operational efficiency is important for those for whom they have large volumes, and those volumes travel great distance in bottle. And you see this when we sort of work with retailers and they publish data to show how many trucks off the road, or the double-digit percentage savings. Aldi, 30% fewer trucks. Albertsons United States, 44% fewer pallets, which can then translate to trucks. So these are double-digit big numbers. We're not talking like a couple of percent or basis points. We're into the big numbers. So operational efficiency is important for those with long-distance supply chains, big volumes, etc. Branding, I think, is important for all, and more in the commercial space. There are boutique producers who produce exceptionally high-quality wine and to have a very loyal following, and where demand far outstrips supply. Do they really need branding? Arguably not. The value is in the juice in the bottle. But if you're, one of a competitive set from California producing for the global market, then branding is fundamentally important. And branding is important for Packamama, let me be clear, not just for our customers. My North Star is Intel, the chip maker. Intel Inside, the sticker that goes on a computer or laptop, is a great example of a B2B company that helps sell B2C. Why is it a North Star for Packamama? Because people buy laptops and computers because of a sticker that says Intel Inside. They trust that then the components in their laptop are of a above average standard. This is just a B2B company that's helping Lenovo or Dell or someone sell more hardware. I hope that the Packamama brand will come to be seen as a beacon of trust by consumers, to say this is different packaging, but it's done by those geeks who care, those geeks who do it well, those geeks who are passionate about wine and packaging and Mother Earth. And so I hope that eventually we can build a brand that people will flip over the bottle to check, because it's a new bottle they've never seen, and they will see the Packamama logo and say, good, okay, I trust the packaging now, and now I know the brand and the wine, and so I'm going to take it.
How do you get to this kind of brand recognition?
First of all, produce quality stuff. I guess that's what Intel did well. So yeah, you cannot buy your way to this. You cannot just spend on advertising and ship rubbish. So produce best in class, which is what we aim to do always with every single bottle, not just a batch. Be innovative, be exciting, be engaging, talk a consumer language, care to engage with consumers, take time to speak to people, learn. So yeah, quality products made with the consumer in mind, talk to consumers, engage with consumers, leverage social media where possible. Probably, frankly, do a bit of a better job than we may be doing at the moment on our marketing, but I am recruiting for a marketing manager, so if anyone hears this and wants to reach out to me to be our marketing manager, if we've not filled the role, then I'll do a cheeky plug, because you got to do that when you're a business owner.
Respectfully, do you think consumers, I mean, the mass consumer, will base their purchase decision on the packaging and on specifically on your packaging?
They will not base the decision, but they will trust a new format. So packaging that contains products that we consume is more important than packaging that contains products that we might sit on or whatever, a sofa or a chair or a table. The liquid is in it that we're consuming it. So I believe people care about that. I believe that faced with two choices, an unbranded pack or a branded pack at the same price with the same accessibility, people would choose the branded one. So I think it is a justified business activity to try to create that position. And you might have asked that question to Michael Dell many years ago, before Intel was a brand, and said, you really think you're going to put a sticker that says you've got a certain chip in a laptop and you're going to sell it better than another one? And, don't know what he would have answered. You'd have to ask Michael Dell, but it's worked phenomenally well. And I again, maybe being too cheeky here, but I do think people care. Moreover, in wine, it is a motive product, a bit like cars or football. Those who consume or engage in that activity are overly connected to it. It is, without a doubt, probably the most expensive item in most people's grocery basket.
Do you think this is something that could appeal also to older generations, or mainly to like Gen Z and after?
I'm not sure I'm building anything for older generations, frankly. I'm most interested in creating packaging that excites the young and the future generations. And this is not about lifetime value from a business metric, and I'm not being unreasonable or unkind here. I'm just being realistic. If you're 20 today, you probably live to 90 or 100 with current medicine. You got a long time on the planet. You really care what the planet's going to look like at 2 and 3 degrees of heating. If you're 60 plus, planet will be okay as long as you got on planet. And so maybe that doesn't trigger people to do enough. However, silver lining to this somewhat doom and gloom start, we do get quite a bit of older demographic engagement with our packaging in some markets. In the UK, we're over a high engagement with younger demographic, but interestingly in Australia and the Nordics, it's an older demographic, and we dug into why this was, because it totally was counter to my rationale. And we found that people were buying the packaging to take on boats, in camper vans, hiking, to cabins. They were buying the wine in our packaging to use whilst engaging in activities or using assets that are not affordable to younger generations. And so if you're going out on a boat, chances are you're older and you own a boat. So in that instance, we found there were older, and in fact in Australia we're really popular with what's called grey nomads. It's a population of people who retire and then buy a camper van and travel around the very diverse continent of Australia and live in a camper van. In that instance, weight and space is important, and in that instance, Packamama wins. But I didn't set out to make packaging for them. I set out to make packaging for Greta Thunberg's generation.
Do you think there's a tension between perceived quality and bottle format and material? I mean, will we ever see, for example, a Packamama bottle for Dom Perignon or Veuve Clicquot?
No is the short answer, because those volumes are too small to make much of an impact. And it's sometimes the point I make. Fine wine producers should care about what the commercial end of the spectrum is packed in, because fine wine producers are far more geographically pegged than commercial producers. If you're a brand and you offer Italian Pinot Grigio, you can get that from the boot, the heel, the top, the middle. You can get it from wherever there's Pinot Grigio available at a good price. If you're a very specific producer in Bulgaria, for those who outside Tuscany, a small area that produces high quality Italian wines, Sassicaia, Tignanello, etc., you should care what the commercial wine in Italy is packed in, because if weather patterns change significantly in Bulgaria, you'll have to pack up and move elsewhere, and then you probably are totally disrupting your life, your family, your livelihood. So then in terms of premium, I guess there's several factors to this. First of all, I've said it before and I'll say it again, sustainability and eco-friendliness should be the ultimate in premium. We're facing an existential threat, not as just the wine industry but as humanity. So premium should be the thing that is the pinnacle, and that should be sustainability. So glass is wonderful for reuse. I got a very dry throat earlier in this recording, and I reached out to get a glass, which I'll show to screen. This glass has existed for many loops. It goes back to the dishwasher. It's a phenomenal type of packaging, but it's high level of reuse. You're making wine in California or in Chile or Argentina and ship it around the world, then what you pack in makes a big difference. Some people think that glass is more sustainable than other formats. Some people think it's okay to smoke. People think all sorts. Data doesn't lie. Glass will become unaffordable for most wines due to carbon taxes. There's already taxes in the UK and other markets called packaging taxes, like extended producer responsibility. It's the cost for local government to collect and recycle. It's given us, Packamama, a commercial and financial advantage against glass, because simply we're an easier product for those councils to handle. And when we get a container deposit scheme or deposit return scheme in 2027, they give us an even greater advantage. So glass works. Packamama's formats, though, are far superior for the 21st century. One final observation on this: whatever I do, I will never beat Usain Bolt in a 100-meter sprint. We're built differently. Packamama bottles are built differently from the standard glass bottle. They've got no chance.
When you speak to wineries and winemakers, which are the main pushbacks that you get?
Many, but I think actually more important, first of all, than the specific pushback is why is there that pushback, first of all, in the presence of data. And this is because we are hardwired as humans not to want risk and not to change. So change brings risk, and risk is counter to our survival mechanism that we've evolved and developed so well, which is why we're so successful compared to our ape cousins. We're a fluke of nature. We're just so successful as a species, and we're hardwired not to take on risk because that helps survival. So people will come up with all sorts of reasons not to, and we're not asking people, by the way, to make a blanket change into our format. We're asking for more companies to trial a low emissions format that is still consumer engaging and that retailers like and consumers share on social media. But then the pushback is, I don't know how to bottle it. I'm not sure I'll get a retailer listing. I'm not sure it's right for us at this point. All sorts. We probably don't dwell too much on that because we have enough current opportunities with people who are excited to innovate. And as an innovation entrepreneur, there's nothing worse than dealing with naysayers who find excuses in everything. The good thing is, though, with packaging change, with packaging legislation change, with packaging taxes, with more data on the impacts of the climate crisis, with more evidence of its impact on the wine industry, you get to a point where the risk in inaction is far, far greater than the risk of considered action. What I mean by that is sitting doing nothing in the face of data that says you should do something is far worse for you than taking a calculated trial at a time when you should be doing it and the data says you should. And now the risk of sitting still is not one that I would take as a commercial wine company. I would start to switch and trial different brands and do small trials in different markets. We don't want to be right for everybody. If you're right for everybody, you're too vanilla to be significant. So yeah, many excuses, but all part of this hardwired reason not to change.
You mentioned different markets. I was speaking to an entrepreneur in the no low alcohol area, and he was mentioning there are some markets where my product is much more appreciated than other markets. For example, he's building this startup in Italy, and he said in Italy is super tough because Italy is super traditional, wine traditional country, a glass a day keeps the doctor away, things like that. Do you see a similar trend with packaging? So do you see some countries and some markets are more responsive than others?
The no and low and the packaging are different. Let me start by saying, because no and low is actually changing the product that's in the bottle that is the crux of why we drink wine. As I said, we've got 8,000 vintages, and the modern day glass bottle is credited to Sir Kenneth Digby 400 years ago in the 17th century. So there's a very big difference. You know, when the Romans, the Greeks, etc. Drank wine, they were not using wine bottles as we know today. So I think you can change the packaging and not have the same result whilst changing the underlying recipe, let's call it, or the reasons why people drink, that relaxing feeling, that social lubricant, that great mix with food, and the food matching. We probably do perform differently though in different markets, thinking about it a bit more. We've had, negligible traction in Italy. We've just done some research with an Italian university to look at Italian consumer behavior to Packamama bottles, and the results were really positive. I'm not sure whether they're allowed to say which university, but a kind winery in Tuscany, filled a sample batch which went out to 200 households with a questionnaire run by this university, and the results were really insightful. So I'm hopeful we do get into Italy soon and other markets, and we're still a startup. Our primary focus is the UK, Australia, the US and France. There's also a deep connection between those markets in terms of where the exports are going, who's buying each other's wines, etc. So yeah, but I think, as I say, I think the shift is moving much faster. I think we've passed the tipping point where when I first started doing this, I was considered probably a little mad, and why didn't I have a real job? But when I sit here today and the conversations we have, even the last 24 hours, the conversations I've had with C-suite executives of wine companies, people are really getting it, and the big retailers are really calling out for need. And moreover, those retailers that are listed on a stock market, for example, and so have to report to shareholders what they're doing. Final point on that, actually what's driving the change. You can see this, for example, in Treasury Wine Estates, which is a big Australian wine company. They report their risks to their shareholders in their annual report, and climate risk is a really big part in the report. So Yeah, they get it.
In terms of distribution, do you think this, for example, these new kind of packaging formats like Packamama, will enable new business models? And what I mean by that, do you think the distribution mix for wineries that adopt this new packaging will remain the same, or there will be, for example, more focus on e-commerce, more focus on D2C? I'm thinking also subscription services since shipping becomes more efficient. So do you think the distribution mix will change?
Let me start with the last one first, and then I'll go the other way. There's quite a bit of commentary at the moment as to whether subscription is dead. Probably not a bad thing that it fades out a little bit. I think subscription drives more purchase and arguably increases waste. You're probably better in a model where you have a very fast button to reorder when you exactly need, but not that you're being sent something without needing it and then it potentially goes to waste. So unless, for example, it's a subscription service for a software or something, which then this doesn't apply to. But if we're talking about a food or beverage, then maybe not a bad thing that those businesses fade a bit or totally. In terms of distance selling and e-com, for sure. I mean, it's where I started this conversation. Wine is a natural online product. And why I say that is wine is a massive long tail. For those who don't know what long tail is and are listening in, it's a very large number of very small volume products. Books and music are the same. You have the bestsellers, but then you have those books that are only read by a cult following, but still can be stocked if they're in a big warehouse in the middle of nowhere, compared to in a retail, bricks and mortar retail in a city center. So wine has a lot of those products, and so naturally lends itself to online. But it's been a miserable failure online so far, including, surprisingly, with Amazon. There's been a success with everything. So I think packaging is mostly to blame for that. It's really not a product for... I mean, who in their mind would put 750 milliliters of wine, which weighs 750 grams, in a bottle that also weighs 750 grams? I mean, this is like, business failure for dummies. It makes no sense. So yeah, I do believe better packaging will unlock better business models, more online, more D2C for wineries direct, and for the reasons I explained before. I hope we can help bring some of that success and better returns around to wineries.
Do you think that consumers actually want to purchase wine online? I mean, because that's a question I'm asking myself. Will there ever be a world where consumers prefer buying wine online rather than going to a shop and seeing with their eyes and choosing? I don't know. That's an open question.
Some consumers, I think some would say the same. Well, why would consumers want to buy stuff like meat or fish that traditionally were served at a butcher or a fishmonger, and you can really see it, and those who know what a good meat looks like, or I'm from a little island, so you know that if you open the cheek of the fish and the gills are bright red, then it's fresh, and if they're pinky, it's as old as the hills, and the same thing with the eyes of the fish. So those specific things, but I mean, with the exception of the rule, I think most people are happy to buy anything online if it's more convenient. So there will be those who will still buy partly online and partly in bricks and mortar. There are those who go pure play online. There's those who go pure play bricks and mortar. I just think that wine's, global industry, it's such, reasonably good volumes, but the online portion is just so small. Even the biggest in the world, wine.com, is still so small compared to a bricks and mortar retailer. Where, it will make natural sense to buy online and have it delivered.
So I want to move to the final section of this interview, which is a bit of a quick fire, which means I will ask you 5 questions and I would like you to answer them in 1 or 2 sentences.
Cool.
So the first thing that comes to mind.
Okay.
So
be nice.
You I'm nice. So you inherit a winery, and that would be a very traditional one, long history, also with a bit of budget. Which are the first three things you do?
Oh, I inherit a winery. The first three things I do, I think of the three people who would do better at keeping their winery than me. Probably I think to those three people. Making money in a winery is very tough. I gotta first have made a lot of money in packaging before I can inherit that winery. But if I look at it as a business case, seriously, I'd want to look at the sales and meet the customers, want to meet the team and know the cost base. And overall, I'd want to know how sustainable the winery is and how we can make it more sustainable.
Is there a wine category, a wine type that would benefit the most from your format? And is there one that isn't really suitable for that?
So the one that benefits most is the one that's large volume and travels greatest distance in bottle. So it would be like a commercial brand that's truly international, maybe from one production base. The one that doesn't is either a fine wine that needs decades of cellaring, or one that is produced and consumed in the local village where they should use a glass bottle and rewash it in a industrial dishwasher, like I explained there when I showed you my glass.
So you said, I read in a previous interview, you said, we can fail, but the wine industry shouldn't fail itself. So what's your call to action for the wine industry? So what's the one phrase that summarizes it all?
I guess I was saying that the success of the wine industry and the success of our planet is far more important than the success of an individual business. Of course, I don't want Packamama to fail. I'm not a sadomaso type of guy, but there's something bigger underlying why I get out of bed and come to the office. So faced with a binary question, success for the wine industry as a whole or success for just myself? Very easy answer. Success for the wine industry as a whole.
So complete this sentence. The wine industry would be much better if it stopped.
If it stopped talking and started acting. I mean, the wine industry does a hell of a lot of blah, 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 and does too little acting. I can name a gazillion talks I've seen recently on LinkedIn where people were preaching all the good stuff, and I look who was on the panel, and they're just shipping wine in heavy glass bottles. And yeah, stop talking and do something about it.
It won't surprise you, but Robin said the same. Thanks for listening to the show. Personally, I learned a lot from Santiago. Wine packaging is often taken for granted, but actually there's a lot of work that can still be done to change the industry. If you enjoyed this, please leave your review on Spotify and feel free to share this with your network. Thanks and see you next week.